Today we are going to read you about the African religions. What is the source, the original source of African religion?
African religions. This entry presents a brief, general picture of Africa's traditional religious heritage, focusing on the major beliefs because these underlie the general attitudes of individuals and society and shape their worldview. Various terms are used to refer to the indigenous religious heritage, including African religion, African traditional religions, African indigenous religions, and African religious traditions. This entry makes use of the most current term, African religion. It is clear that in such a vast continent, there are diversities of religious life and concepts, but there are also similarities that make it possible to give a general picture. After a brief word on the origin of African religion, this entry considers it in terms of belief in God and other spiritual beings, mystical power, and the continuation of human life after death. It describes how human beings are seen to be at the center of the world and traces the journey of individual life from birth to death and beyond. Moral and ethical values are shown to regulate people's relationships with one another, nature, and God. African peoples give health and related problems much attention for both their physical and their spiritual welfare. Religions originating outside of Africa, together with the influences of modern life, also have an impact upon the traditional religious heritage. Origin and sources of African religion. African religion evolved gradually as people experienced different life situations, raising questions and reflecting on such mysteries of life as birth and death, joy and suffering, the forces of nature, and the purpose of life. Its history is bound up with the history of each people or tribe and goes back to prehistoric times. Some elements distinguish it from Christianity and Islam, the other major religions of Africa, while other elements resemble them. African religion is practiced in the early 21st century mostly in the southern two-thirds of Africa, including Madagascar, where Christianity is statistically dominant. In the northern one-third, dominated by Islam, African religion exists beneath the surface among indigenous peoples, despite their having been subjugated and dominated by Arab immigrants for many centuries. African religion is found primarily in oral sources, including stories, myths, proverbs, prayers, ritual incantations, songs, names of people and places, and the specialized and carefully guarded knowledge of religious personages. Other sources are art and language, ceremonies and rituals, religious objects and places like shrines, altars, and ceremonial symbols, and magical objects and practices. It also emerges among Christians and Muslims in times of crisis, like severe illness or death, disputes, political and sports competitions, examinations, and the search for employment. Since the 19th century, these sources have increasingly been recorded in writing, and since the second half of the 20th century, on film and on audio tapes and videotapes. African religion spread to the Western Hemisphere through African peoples who were forcibly transplanted to the West Indies and the Americas by the slave trade. It settled there and survived in a mixture with Christianity, despite the influence of other cultures and environments. For example, the spirit possessions that abound among people of African descent in Brazil and the West Indies have their origins in Africa. Voodoo in the Caribbean and Macumba in Brazil are remnants of African religion that have been modified to suit local practice. Some names of people in Jamaica, like Cudjoe, Achempong, Kwaku, and Obi, are originally African, but these are said to be disappearing. After careful study of the American scene, Gayrod Wilmore concludes that an essential ingredient of Afro-American Christianity prior to the Civil War was the creative residuum of the African religions, characterized by a spirituality of response to the reality of the spirit world and its reaction with objective reality. 1983, page 26. Major beliefs in African religion. As an all-embracing worldview, African religion has a number of beliefs held in common by the community. Individuals cannot reject a particular belief, since beliefs are part and parcel of the wider community. The term community is used here to refer to a grouping of persons in a particular area who lead a fairly similar cultural life within a given people or in a town. Belief in God. Belief in God is found among all African peoples. The creator and preserver of all things, God is invisible, but the ongoing work of creation points to God's existence and involvement in the world. There are no atheists in African traditional society. Belief in God is part of the common knowledge of everyone, including children. There are no pictorial or other representations of God by African peoples. Oral appellations of God include Father, Mother, Parent, Friend, Savior, Protector, Giver of Children, Giver of Rain, the Shining One, the Kind One, and the Everlasting One. God is good, compassionate, just, and loving to all people. The overall picture of God is of one who is above gender classification, neither male nor female, since God is spirit. To grasp some aspects of God, people find anthropomorphic concepts useful and, according to the situation, may speak of God in male or female terms for that purpose. Furthermore, many African languages do not distinguish gender grammatically. People express their belief in and awareness of God through prayers, invocations, sacrifices and offerings, praise songs, and dedication of children to God. In some areas, priests and priestesses officiate at religious ceremonies, pray on behalf of their communities, and pass on the theological, philosophical, and practical knowledge of their religion. They are, or should be, morally upright. In Nigeria and Uganda, priestesses regard themselves as married, i.e., wholly dedicated, to God for a given period of time in their life, but later marry human husbands. Belief in other spiritual beings. There is widespread belief in the existence of other spiritual beings created by and subject to God. The spirits can be considered in two categories: those associated with nature, and those that are remnants of human beings after death. Nature spirits are personifications of heavenly or earthly objects and phenomena. The stars, the sun, thunder, rain and storms, mountains, earthquakes, lakes, waterfalls, and caves. Some communities, especially in West Africa, have divinities, spirit functionaries prominent in the life of the community. This particularly reflects the political structure, with the queen or king at the top and various chieftains or ministers below. Some divinities are said to have assisted God in the ordering of the world, others to be in charge of aspects of nature, like the weather, earthquakes, and epidemics. But many African peoples do not have divinities in their cosmology. Most of the human spirits are those of people who died more than 5 generations ago. The others are persons who are remembered by name and known collectively as the living dead, since they are regarded as part of the family. When they appear to the living, either directly or through a medium, they are recognized by name and what they communicate, in the form of requests, instructions, or warnings, is taken very seriously by their families. However, the spirits of the departed generally have little or no place in the beliefs of nomadic peoples, probably because they do not remain for years on the land where they bury their dead. Spirits of the unknown dead are sometimes called upon or otherwise used in divination and medical practice, but otherwise they have no personal family ties to the living. They are said to possess people or animals and are often featured in folk stories in which they perform great feats, although sometimes they are depicted as stupid or as fearful of the living. Many stories are told about spirits, resulting in an integration of their world into the world of living human beings. Humanity at the center of the world. African religion places humans at the center of the world. It is believed throughout Africa that God created human beings, and thousands of stories and myths visualize how this happened. According to some, humans were created at the end of the primal creation, formed from clay as husband and wife, or as two pairs, or created in heaven, sky, and lowered to the earth. Others say that husband and wife were created in a vessel, in water, or in the fruit of a tree. Creation stories relate that the original state of humanity was one of bliss, in which people were endowed with immortality, rejuvenation, if they became old, or resurrection, if they died. The earth was directly linked to heaven. The sky, God and humans lived close to each other as a family. For various reasons, these gifts were lost. Death, disease, and suffering appeared, as well as the separation between heaven and earth, between God and humans. However, God did not abandon humans, but he endowed them with various abilities and knowledge so that they could survive. Through sacrifices and prayers, humans still have access to God at any time. Through prayers, people praise and thank God and solicit God's help in the fight against disease, suffering, danger, and death. A strong feature of African cosmology is the recognition of the world as comprising two interlinked realities, the visible and the invisible, the physical and the spiritual. Both are bound together in a primordial unity. They interact, and Africans do not make a strong distinction between the two. This helps to explain African awareness of and insights into the spiritual realm, an awareness at both shallow and deep levels ranging from visions, dreams involving spiritual objects or beings or messages, contact with the living dead and spirits, and divination to concepts about and experiences of God. The life journey of the individual is marked with rites, particularly at birth, initiation, marriage, and death. Birth and name-giving ceremonies express joy in the family and gratitude to God for the child. Children are the symbol and actualization of immortality. They counteract death with new life and old age with rejuvenation. At adolescence, initiation ceremonies are performed, often followed by a period of seclusion for the initiated, during which they learn matters pertaining to adult life. Initiation ceremonies serve, among other things, to give the individual an identity as a member of the community to which he or she is thereby mystically bound. The most dramatic involves circumcision for boys and clitoridectomy for girls. The personal shedding of blood forges mystical links to the ground, to the land. Marriage is a religious duty that, under normal circumstances, everyone is obliged or expected to fulfill. The bearing of children is the central part of marriage, and no efforts are spared to ensure that there are children in each marriage. Otherwise, the couple fails to become a family. In effect, the family never dies, only its members do. If, for example, the husband is impotent, his brother, in the wider sense of kinship ties, must sleep with his wife so that she will bear him children. If the wife is barren, her husband will marry another wife, who will be expected to bear children for both wives. Polygamy is an accepted and respected form of marriage in about 15% of African families. Children knit the community into a vast network of relationships: brothers, sisters, cousins, parents, grandparents, uncles, aunts, and many distant relatives. The basic philosophy says, "I am because we are, and since we are therefore I am." Burial and funeral rites serve, among other things, to send the departed in peace to the spirit world and to express condolences to the bereaved. Various symbols and acts speak of death and the continuation of life. Normal activities are stopped for a day following a death or funeral. Hair on the head is shaved. The house of the departed is closed or even abandoned. Clothes of colors that symbolize bereavement, white, black, or red, are worn. The bodies of surviving members of the family are smeared with mud or white chalk. Cattle are driven away from the homestead of the departed. People fast, and fires in the home are extinguished. Some societies bury a few personal belongings with the dead, such as spears, cooking pots, ornaments, money, and clothes. Among other groups, the property of the deceased is distributed by force, if need be, among relatives or clan members. Life after death. Belief in the continuation of life after death is held all over Africa. The next world is pictured as being like the present one, inhabited by spirits and located in thick forests, desert places, underground, or on mountains. There is neither reward for a good life on earth nor punishment for an evil life. The departed retain their human characteristics, and the living dead are still part of their earthly families, to whom they appear in dreams, in waking, or through divination, particularly if there is a major family event. The living show remembrance of the departed through such acts of affection as naming new children after them, taking care of their graves, and pouring libations of beer, wine, milk, or tea, and placing bits of food on the floor, on the graves, or in a family altar. People who die without children are considered most unfortunate, since they have no descendants to remember them, something that the extended family only rarely does. In some societies, people invoke departed members of the family, especially parents and grandparents, and ask them to relay their requests further until they reach God. There is thus a unity and a line of communication between the living, the departed, and God. Harmony is necessary to maintain this unity in a healthy spiritual condition. Belief in mystical power. There is a deeply rooted belief in a mystical power or force in the universe that derives from God. This power is used in medical practice, divination, protecting people and property, predicting where to find lost articles, and foretelling the outcome of an undertaking. It is also employed in the practice of magic, sorcery, and witchcraft. Diviners, traditional doctors, and witches know better than others how to employ it. The belief in and practice of magic causes much fear in African life, which leads to accusations, quarrels, fights, and countermeasures in families and communities. The positive use of this mystical power is cherished and plays a major role in regulating ethical relations in the community and in supplying answers to questions about the causes of good luck and misfortune. Sacred places and objects. Sacred places and objects, including mountains, caves, waterfalls, rocks, trees, rainmaking stones, and certain animals, as well as altars, sacrificial pots, masks, drums, and colors, are set aside for religious activities. Some places are kept as sanctuaries in which no human beings or animals may be killed, and where no trees may be felled. Some homesteads have family altars or graves that serve as sacred spots where prayers, offerings, and small sacrifices are made. Nature is often personalized in order that humans may communicate and live in harmony with it. If humans hurt nature, nature hurts them. Humans are the priests of nature, indeed of the universe. This is a sacred trust given to them by God, who endowed them with more abilities than other creatures on earth. Ethics and morals. The ethics and morals of African religion are embedded in values, customs, traditional laws, and taboos. God is ultimately the giver of morality. Moral offenses include disrespect toward elderly people, sexual transgressions, incest, rape, intercourse with children, adultery, and homosexual intercourse, murder, stealing, robbery, telling lies, deliberately causing bodily harm, and the use of sorcery and witchcraft. Such acts are punished by making the offender and his or her family feel shame or ostracism or pay a fine. Sometimes the offender is beaten or stoned to death. On the other hand, kindness, friendliness, truthfulness, politeness, generosity, hospitality, hard work, caring for elderly parents, respect for elderly people and the weak and retarded, and protection of children and women are virtues that earn praise and admiration in the community. Women are regarded and treated as full moral agents. They are also protected against maltreatment by men, since they are considered to be less able or equipped to defend themselves physically, especially when they are pregnant or aged. Society rewards the good and punishes the evil. The spirits of the living dead maintain interest in the morals of their descendants and may punish offenders by causing failure in undertakings, sickness, and bad dreams as warnings or deterrents. God is ultimately watching over the moral life of the community, society, and humankind. From time to time, if moral order is severely broken, God may punish the wider society or give warnings through calamities, epidemics, drought, war, and famine. The home and the community convey moral teaching, generally from the older to the younger members, through word and example. Initiation ceremonies, some of which may last several years, are the formal communal occasions for instilling moral values in young people. Stories, proverbs, and taboos are employed in the teaching of morals. Where the basic philosophy of life is I am because we are, it is extremely important that the two dimensions of I am and we are be carefully observed and maintained for the survival of all through moral values. The individual is very much exposed to the community, and anonymity is virtually out of the question. African religion affirms and celebrates life. Laughter is heard even in the most difficult situations. Communal festivals filled with rejoicing, laughter, eating, dancing, singing, and drumming renew and strengthen community ties. Even sad occasions like funerals are communal events that bring many people together to share in mourning and thus lighten the burden of bereavement. Health and medicine. Life in African communities is often a struggle against forces of destruction, illness, disease, accidents, childlessness, suffering, misfortune, spirit possession, quarrels, war, and death. Natural threats such as drought, earthquakes, epidemics, famines, and locust invasions affect the whole community. When these forces of destruction strike the individual or the family, people ask who has caused it to happen. Even if there are physical explanations of how an accident has occurred, or how a disease like malaria or AIDS is caused, human agents are believed to be behind it. These agents are said to use mystical power, magic, witchcraft, sorcery, the spell, the curse, or broken taboos, following quarrels, acting out of jealousy, hatred, greed, or evil intentions. Health is seen as a fundamentally ethical question pointing to relationships in the family, in the community, and between people and nature. Medicine women and men, traditional doctors, are found in every village. Their work is highly appreciated and in constant demand. They undergo long training and apprenticeship to acquire knowledge of herbs, roots, fruits, shells, insects, and juices, especially of their medicinal properties. They learn to diagnose illnesses and complaints that affect not only human beings, but also animals and fields. They use divination to communicate with the invisible world at the psychic level of consciousness. They perform healing rituals and invocations. Their medicine is directed not only against the disease or misfortune in question, but also to the removal and prevention of its mystical cause, such as witchcraft. The human or spirit agent behind the problem is usually named, and part of the healing process involves coming to terms with the diagnosed offender. The process of diagnosis, cure, and preventive measures is often carried out in the presence of the family or community, which thus participates in the healing. African society generally shows great care toward handicapped and retarded people. Part of this special treatment comes from the fear that if you mistreat or fail to help the handicapped, you or members of your family will become similarly handicapped. Likewise, the issue of abortion is partly undergirded by the fear that a major misfortune, such as the failure to bear more children, will befall the family of a woman who has an abortion. Furthermore, the high rate of infant mortality has probably contributed to the great value that people attach to children and their consequent abhorrence of abortion. There are extremely few written references to abortion, and in some societies, a woman who has had one is killed by the community or a curse is placed on her. There are, however, areas where twins were traditionally considered to bring misfortune, and consequently one or both children would be killed for the protection of the community. On the other hand, in certain areas, twins were, and still are, considered to be special people, bearers of blessings or extraordinary abilities, and even called children of God. Written information on so-called mercy killing is scanty, but suicide and homicide occur in many areas. From time to time, the community is provoked beyond endurance, and a mob kills by stoning, beating, or burning an offender, such as someone accused of stealing and robbery, nearly always men, practicing witchcraft, nearly always women, or committing sexual offenses like incest, intercourse with children, or rape only men. In such cases, the community undergoes a healing process, physically and ethically. The life and dignity of the community are thereby placed above the lives of individual members who do not maintain its values and order. Medicine is also used to bring good fortune, health, success, loving relations, protection against danger. In their practice, traditional doctors hold that it is God who heals or brings about good results, and some of them regularly invoke God for healing and the welfare of the individuals and community. These doctors are upright, trustworthy, and respected members of their community, the symbols of its welfare and health. Through them, folk medical knowledge and practice have been passed on through many generations. Since modern or Western medicine and its wonders are too expensive for most Africans, The traditional doctors continue to respond to the health needs of many people and complement or even replace the services of modern medicine. As in other spheres of religious life, women are very active in health matters and are believed to show deeper sensitivities than men, especially since they carry human life in their own bodies and are more attuned to the spiritual dimension of health. In many communities, female traditional doctors outnumber their male counterparts, and nearly all mediums are women. Conclusion. African religion has encountered other religions, notably Christianity and Islam, and other cultures, especially Western. Many of its adherents convert to Christianity or Islam. But conversion does not mean abandoning the world of traditional religiosity. On the contrary, many Christians derive rich spirituality from African religion. Translations of the Bible into some 700 African languages, as of 1992, use religious terms and concepts of African religion. But while it seems to find ways of surviving and of accommodating to contemporary life, there are changes in social, political, educational, technological, and scientific life for which it has not prepared itself. In the 19th century, African religion was studied almost exclusively by foreigners, missionaries, anthropologists, colonial rulers, and self-styled African experts. On the whole, it was presented negatively, often interpreted falsely, and ridiculed by those with racist attitudes. However, since about the middle of the 20th century, a more objective approach has gained ground not only in Africa, but also in the New World, where peoples of African descent find in it a meaningful part of their heritage. The African religious heritage in North America provided the cultural, social, and spiritual setting for modeling Christianity among African Americans. For example, the place of the church as a focal point of community life, the dynamic worship tradition, and the assimilation of African cultural traits. In Latin America, especially in Brazil, African religion has blended firmly with Roman Catholicism, so much so that many people do not know where to draw the line, if need be. Some of the healing practices called folk medicine are traceable to those of traditional doctors in Africa. Gerard Wilmore, 1983, Roger Bastide, 1978, and Leonard Barrett, 1976, among others, have documented the survival and strong impact of African religion in the New World. We are in a much better position to understand African religion academically at the beginning of the 21st century than at the beginning of the 20th century. Just as it has survived since prehistoric times and has done so in new social and cultural environments across the oceans, we may presume that it will survive in new forms in the coming generations. John S. Biddy, 1995. See also Circumcision, Islam, Bioethics and Environmental Ethics, Medical Ethics, History of Africa, Medicine, Anthropology of Minorities. As research subjects, population ethics, religious traditions, Islamic perspectives. Bibliography.
Awolału, J. Omosade, Endopamu, P. Adelumo. 1979 rok. West African Traditional Religion. Ibadan, Nigeria. Onibonoye Press.
Barrett, Leonard E., 1976. The Sun and the Drum, African Roots in Jamaican Folk Tradition. Kingston, Jamaica, Sanders. Bastide, Roger. 1978. The African Religions of Brazil. Toward a Sociology of the Interpenetration of Civilizations, T.R. Helen Seba. Baltimore, Johns Hopkins University Press. Hardula, Ramo. 1980, Miro and His Practice, a study of the ethno-medical repertoire of a Tanzanian herbalist. London, Trimetti. Idowu E. Balaji. 1973, African Traditional Religion, a Definition. London, SCM Press. Biddy John S. 1990, African Religions and Philosophy, 2nd edition. Oxford, Heinemann. Biddy John S. 1991, Introduction to African Religion, 2nd edition. Oxford, Heinemann.
Mulago, Guazicata. 1980, La religion traditionnelle des Bantu et leur vision du monde, 2nd edition. Kinshasa, Zaire, University of Kinshasa.
Abo, Christine. 1980, African Women, Their Struggle for Economic Independence. London, Zed Press. Alyapona, Jacob K. Edition 1991. African Traditional Religions in Contemporary Society. New York, International Religious Foundation. Apoku Kofi A. 1978. West African Traditional Religion. Accra, Ghana, Far Eastern Publishers. Parinder, E. Jeffrey. 1962. African Traditional Religion. 2nd edition. London, SPCK. Ranger, Terrence O. and Kamambo, Isaiah. eds 1972. The Historical Study of African Religion, with special reference to East and Central Africa. London, Heinemann. Sempabua, Joshua W. 1983. African Traditional Moral Norms and Their Implications for Christianity, a Case Study of Ganda Ethics. St. Augustine, Germany, Staler. Settaloni, Gabriel M. 1976. The Image of God Among the Sothotswana. Rotterdam, A. Valkema. Wilmore, Gayrod S. 1983. Black Religion and Black Radicalism, An Interpretation of the Religious History of Afro-American People, 2nd edition. Marinol, New York, Orbis. Encyclopedia of Bioethics. African Religion. Views updated May 8, 2018. African Religions. place of the departed. Most believe that rewards would have, irrespective of a person's earthly behavior, provided the correct burial rites have been observed. But if a person is a wizard, a murderer, a thief, one who has broken the community code or taboos, or one who has had an unnatural death or an improper burial, then such a person may be doomed to punishment in the afterlife as a wandering ghost, and may be beaten and expelled by the ancestors or subjected to a period of torture according to the seriousness of their misdeeds, much like the Catholic concept of purgatory. Among many African peoples is the widespread belief that witches and sorcerers are not admitted to the spirit world, and therefore they are refused proper burial. Sometimes their bodies are subjected to actions that would make such burial impossible, such as burning, chopping up, and feeding them to hyenas. Among the Africans, to be cut off from the community of the ancestors in death is the nearest equivalent of hell. The concept of reincarnation is found among many peoples. Reincarnation refers to the soul of a dead person being reborn in the body of another. There is a close relationship between birth and death. African beliefs in reincarnation differ from those of major Asian religions, especially Hinduism, in a number of important ways. Hinduism is world-renouncing, conceiving of a cycle of rebirth in a world of suffering and illusion from which people wish to escape, only by great effort. And there is a system of rewards and punishments whereby one is reborn into a higher or lower station in life, from whence the caste system arose. These ideas that view reincarnation as something to be feared and avoided are completely lacking in African religions. Instead, Africans are world-affirming and welcome reincarnation. The world is a light, warm, and living place to which the dead are only too glad to return from the darkness and coldness of the grave. The dead return to their communities, except for those unfortunate ones previously mentioned, and there are no limits set to the number of possible reincarnations. An ancestor may be reincarnated in more than one person at a time. Some African myths say that the number of souls and bodies is limited. It is important for Africans to discover which ancestor is reborn in a child, for this is a reason for deep thankfulness. The destiny of a community is fulfilled through both successive and simultaneous multiple reincarnations. Transmigration, also called metempsychosis, denotes the changing of a person into an animal. The most common form of this idea relates to a witch or sorcerer who is believed to be able to transform into an animal in order to perform evil deeds. Africans also believe that people may inhabit particular animals after death, especially snakes, which are treated with great respect. Some African rulers reappear as lions. Some peoples believe that the dead will reappear in the form of the totem animal of that ethnic group, and these totems are fearsome, such as lions, leopards, or crocodiles. They symbolize the terrible punishments the dead can inflict if the moral values of the community are not upheld. Burial and mourning customs. Death in African religions is one of the last transitional stages of life requiring passage rites, and this too takes a long time to complete. The deceased must be detached from the living and make as smooth a transition to the next life as possible because the journey to the world of the dead has many interruptions. If the correct funeral rites are not observed, the deceased may come back to trouble the living relatives. Usually an animal is killed in ritual, although this also serves the practical purpose of providing food for the many guests. Personal belongings are often buried with the deceased to assist in the journey. Various other rituals follow the funeral itself. Some kill an ox at the burial to accompany the deceased. Others kill another animal some time after the funeral. 3 months to 2 years, and even longer, is the period observed. The Nguni in southern Africa call the slaying of the ox the returning ox, because the beast accompanies the deceased back home to his or her family and enables the deceased to act as a protecting ancestor. The home-bringing rite is a common African ceremony. Only when a deceased person's surviving relatives have gone, and there is no one left to remember him or her, can the person be said to have really died. At that point, the deceased passes into the graveyard of time, losing individuality and becoming one of the unknown multitude of immortals. Many African burial rites begin with the sending away of the departed with a request that they do not bring trouble to the living, and they end with a plea for the strengthening of life on the earth and all that favors it. According to the Tanzanian theologian Laurenti Magisa, funeral rites simultaneously mourn for the dead and celebrate life in all its abundance. Funerals are a time for the community to be in solidarity and to regain its identity. In some communities, this may include dancing and merriment for all but the immediate family, thus limiting or even denying the destructive powers of death and providing the deceased with light feet for the journey to the other world. Ancient customs are adapted in many South African urban funerals. When someone has died in a house, all the windows are smeared with ash, all pictures in the house turned around, and all mirrors and televisions, and any other reflective objects covered. The beds are removed from the deceased's room, and the bereaved women sit on the floor, usually on a mattress. During the time preceding the funeral, usually from 7 to 13 days, visits are paid by people in the community to comfort the bereaved family. In the case of Christians, consolatory services are held at the bereaved home. The day before the funeral, the corpse is brought home before sunset and placed in the bedroom. A night vigil then takes place, often lasting until the morning. The night vigil is a time for pastoral care, to comfort and encourage the bereaved. A ritual killing is sometimes made for the ancestors, as it is believed that blood must be shed at this time to avoid further misfortune. Some peoples use the hide of the slaughtered beast to cover the corpse or place it on top of the coffin as a blanket for the deceased. Traditionally, the funeral takes place in the early morning, often before sunrise, and not late in the afternoon, as it is believed that sorcerers move around in the afternoons looking for corpses to use for their evil purposes. Because sorcerers are asleep in the early morning, this is a good time to bury the dead. In some communities, children and unmarried adults are not allowed to attend the funeral. During the burial itself, the immediate family of the deceased is expected to stay together on one side of the grave at a designated place. They are forbidden from speaking or taking any vocal part in the funeral. It is customary to place the deceased's personal property, including eating utensils, walking sticks, blankets, and other useful items, in the grave. After the funeral, the people are invited to the deceased's home for the funeral meal. Many people follow a cleansing ritual at the gate of the house, where everyone must wash off the dust of the graveyard before entering the house. Sometimes pieces of cut aloe are placed in the water, and this water is believed to remove bad luck. Churches that use holy water sprinkle people to cleanse them from impurity at this time. In southern Africa, the period of strict mourning usually continues for at least a week after the funeral.